Thanks so much for joining us for this webinar this evening. So Campaign Against Climate Change is really pleased to be hosting this webinar along with our friends at Debt for Climate and Debt Justice. As I said, this meeting is being recorded, at least the speaker's presentation part of it, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions later in the meeting, so you can ask the speakers directly or put questions in the chat. And everyone should be muted at the moment. Just make sure you stay on mute while the speakers are talking. So about what we're talking about this evening. So basically, anyone who is thinking seriously about our accelerating climate crisis will know that to address it, we have to be thinking about money and power. A recent report just out recently found that extreme weather fueled by the climate crisis has cost some of the world's poorest countries $156 billion over the past 2 decades. And climate negotiations have been dominated by the very unequal struggle to get rich countries to pay up for the costs of adapting to climate impacts, of poorer countries being able to develop their economies away from fossil fuels, and for the costs of loss and damage from climate disasters. And of course, meanwhile, fossil fuel companies have continued to rake in profits from the destruction that they cause. And this year, a new disaster has hit, which is the sudden withdrawal of US aid funding and healthcare, food aid, much other development aid is basically disappearing overnight. And what's really shameful is that the UK and other countries haven't responded by increasing our own funding, but actually stepping back and cutting aid funding. So some of these issues about climate finance are actually quite familiar to anyone who's engaged with climate justice campaigning or followed issues around the UN climate negotiations. But one thing we don't always do as climate campaigners is lift the lid on the deeper economic injustices which underlie and cause the need for climate finance in many ways. And that's the fact that so many global South countries are caught in a debt trap of unjust debt, which climate disasters then intensify, and which is a major barrier to them taking any action on climate change and protecting themselves from its impact. Right now, debt payments are now at their highest level in 30 years. So we talk a lot about aid funding going from the global north to the global south, but we don't always talk about the funding that's flowing the other way. And 2025 is important because it's a Jubilee year, which is marks the biggest global campaign for debt cancellation since the turn of the millennium. Now, there might be some people on this call who are too young to remember the Jubilee 2000 campaign. And if you are in that category, then Lorraine will be talking a bit more about it later. So groups around the world are calling for debt justice and climate justice. And there's a crucial international summit taking place in just a few weeks' time, which we'll hear more about. We'll be hearing from speakers who work on the intersection of debt and climate crises, and we'll talk more about the activity this year. There is going to be a lot of information shared this evening, so while we'll be putting some links in the chat, you needn't worry too much that you've got to get everything down, because I'll send around an email afterwards to everyone who's signed up to make sure that we all have the information to catch up with later. So I'm going to introduce now our first speaker, and Buenaventura works for the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, based in the Philippines. And I just want to say that we appreciate her joining so much, because if we have a quick think about time zones, this is not a convenient time for her to join, and I really, really appreciate that you're able to join us and share her long experience of working on these issues. Thanks, May.
Okay, I'm just going to start sharing May's slides.
Okay, so thank you very much, and Very happy to be here. I'm happy that I'm awake at 2 a.m. so, so yeah, this is not too long, and I'm sure you know a lot already of what I'm going to say. But to highlight some things about how debt and climate crisis are inextricably linked, and how we're feeling what's happening today with very very deep roots in the past that continue to be present today. So next slide. So we think that, and we can see it in history, that our colonizers were also our first creditors or lenders, and through those unequal and unjust relations, this is how the global South was steadily dispossessed of its labor, of its natural resources. And debt continues to be used as an instrument. It's a vital cog of the system of colonialism, as well as the system today of neoliberal capitalism. And some of the examples which were also cited in the work of Debt Justice UK on debt and colonialism, for example, the railways in different parts of the world that were financed by loans, and also this very reprehensible act of the Belgian government of transferring its World Bank debt to the Congo, and also debt payments as conditions for the grant of independence. And you know this probably more than I about the Slave Compensation Act of 1837, which was one of the biggest bailouts of slave owners, and the next one being 2009. So those slave owners were compensated by millions of pounds sterling for freeing the slaves, and they lost out on the profits from owning slaves. So next slide. So indeed, if we look into history and to our current context, this is a system that really feeds on and worsens injustice. And it's this inequality, this deep inequalities in power that maintain and sustain the system and generates this flow that Claire mentioned earlier, that this net flow, outflow of resources from the global South to the North. Also, we see how wealth has been concentrated little by little on the elites and big corporations. And now we have this financial system that is really very deeply unfair and works to the interest of a handful of elites and rich countries. So we are in the global market. The South continues to provide these resources, and we can see this in the extraction of natural resources, also in the global care chains that the global South continues to supply with its labor. So the pressure is also increasing on the more acute extraction of natural resources, and developing countries are what we see as having this what they call the resource curse of being pressed to extract more in terms of mining, for example, as a way to keep themselves in good standing and keep debt windows open. Next slide. So in terms of debt, already mentioned, and we're very well aware that even by World Bank reports that this continues to be record-breaking year upon year. And the last report by the World Bank from its 2024 International Debt Report puts the figure at a staggering 8.8 trillion. That's the whole outstanding debt, including China, with the public and publicly guaranteed portion comprising the bigger part. So this is the black line here in this graph, no? So if we spotlight certain countries, you can see there how large the PPG debt is. as a share of total external debt. So which only means, of course, that the funds for essential social spending is getting smaller and smaller. So if you look at Nepal, it's almost it's more than 90%. It's Nepal is not yet what they call not yet in the danger zone of debt distress, but it has swiftly accelerated, and they're now graduating as an LDC country, and also ODA is declining. So they're facing the prospect of even more borrowings. So other countries are cited there. Of course, we know the case of Pakistan, and Sri Lanka was, of course, the first country that defaulted in our region for, I think, a century. Also Bangladesh, and my own country, the Philippines, and our neighbor, Indonesia. Next slide. So a lot of the difficulties from the debt burdens, it's not only the impacts, but also how our economies are shaped through IMF conditionalities. So if we look at, for example, the privatizations of water in the Philippines and Indonesia, those came as conditionalities of loans. Also, the VAT has also been imposed in Bangladesh and the Philippines as a conditionality of loans. So while they continue to deny this, the IMF, famously by former managing director Christine Lagarde, that they don't do structural adjustment anymore. So they still do it. So this is the study by Alexandros Kentikelenis and Thomas Stubbs, showing the dark areas where there's more than 1,000 in terms of the conditionalities being imposed. That's up to 2019, and I'm sure in the next years there were also conditionalities imposed. Next slide. And of course, as a result of that, there's heavier burdens of debt servicing, since supposedly in COVID they offered the debt service suspension initiative, which didn't work, and then almost at the same time launching the common framework, which also has not worked, and you only have now 4 countries applying since 2020, and really no reductions, but actually the opposite of what has happened to volumes and levels of debt since its swift acceleration during COVID. So according to UNCTAD, developing countries spent up to 1.4 trillion to service foreign debts as of 2023. And then the ratio to revenues has also rose from 6.3 to 14.7 between 2010 and 2023. So if you look at how this average across 147 countries that were looked at, it stood at 43%. Next slide. This is also a study that you may also already be familiar with from Debt Service Watch, showing how much of just a proportion of how debt service compares to revenues. So supposedly taxpayers' money supplying services, essential services as part of government's mandate. But we see for lower income countries and lower middle income countries, this is taking up a large chunk of the revenues pie. In terms also of the global regions, you see there averaging for all emerging developing countries, Africa, Asia, really with a really tall bar, showing how much of revenue is taken up as a share of debt service. Next slide. And if we also look at Debt Service Watch also looked at how debt service compares to public spending. So debt service as a percent of spending also takes up the significant proportions, that are very alarming. This jives with a push also for giving it up to the private sector to provide rather than through public services. Next slide. So we see also this climate debt trap happening right now, because loans are really being pushed as and the answer to the climate crisis, and much of climate finance that's being mobilized is in the form of loans. So the last time we looked, more than 70% of climate finance are in the form of loans and other non-grant instruments. So each of these loans, of course, that we pay adds already to the mounting debt that is engulfing the global south, even as climate catastrophes are becoming more acute and frequent. So just a breakdown that of the $66 billion in public climate finance reported from 2019 to 2020, just this year, you can see that a very small portion was provided as grants as compared to loans. No, so even if it's concessional, it's still loans. And one questions really how significant those amounts are vis-a-vis the gravity of the climate crisis. Next slide. So I also cite here in terms of the Green Climate Fund, which was supposedly set up to address the adaptation needs of the global south, and this again being taken over by the international, what they call international access entities, including MDBs. So 79% of that, of 200 approved projects, is being accessed by ADB, World Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the African Development Bank. So MDB climate finance is still predominantly world loan-based, and 81% of that provided as concessional loans, but still, as I said, nonetheless as debts. Next slide. So in closing, we see that the debt crisis has shaped our maldevelopment and made us more vulnerable to shocks, including the climate crisis. And it's no surprise why the global south is more heavily impacted because we face a lot of hazards. But when hazards become disasters, it's because of these inequalities in resources, in economic positions, and so on. And the climate crisis is now cashing in on the climate crisis and using it as a justification for pushing more loans. So also this point that in fact, if we need to look at also historically and the big picture of how the climate debt and ecological debt is really so massive that it cannot be paid, and the financial debt that we are being asked to pay is actually so small in compared to that ecological and climate debt. So we stand for and fight for restitution and reparations, and the profound transformation of the global system and national economies, debt governance reform being part of this comprehensive transformation. So I think this is my last slide, just to invite you all to join us on the 27th to the 29th for Global Days of Action leading up to the Financing for Development conference, where we see opportunities for really transformative outcomes, or laying the grounds towards transformative actions on debt and inequitable lending and behavior practices. Thank you very much.
Thanks, May. It's there's some quite staggering figures in there about the amount of government money that's just disappearing straight away in debt repayments. So the next speaker we've got is Tess Woolfenden from Debt Justice, and she's going to talk a bit more about the specific links between debt and climate.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Claire. And can you see my slides?
Yep.
Awesome. After this many years of working on Zoom, I should be good at this by now. So yeah, as Claire said, I've got 5 minutes to talk about the intersections between the debt and climate crisis. May has already covered quite a bit of what what entails this link, what makes up the link between these two. So I'll try and highlight some different elements as well, but I'm going to break down the links into 4 key points. The first two are really looking at the ways that the current debt crisis is undermining climate action across global south countries. So May's done a fantastic job of kind of highlighting how much money is leaving global south countries into the hands of wealthy external creditors, and that there is a debt crisis. And that's really important to emphasize, because the powers that be in the debt space, the IMF, the World Bank, the G20, are currently refusing to accept that there even is a debt crisis. And yeah, external debt payments are at their highest levels in 30 years, as Claire has said. And what this essentially means is that governments do not have the resources they need to meet people's needs. So this is transport, healthcare, education, and of course also addressing the climate emergency. So just to put this into a number, global south countries are currently spending 5 times more on debt payments than they are on addressing the climate emergency. So that just gives you a kind of strong sense of how much money we're talking about here. The second way that the debt crisis is undermining climate action, again, May has already mentioned this, but many countries do not have the resources they need to meet their really high debt burdens, and so have to try and find ways of finding those resources, given that there is no fair, just, fast debt relief process that countries can apply to right now. So we've already talked about how governments are cutting public spending in order to generate those resources. Another way is that some countries are turning to their natural resources, including fossil fuels, to generate the foreign exchange they need to meet debt payments. And this is often enforced and encouraged by key institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, who push this kind of extractive development model on countries with the explicit intention that this is a way to generate more revenue to meet debt payments. So the image you can see on screen here is indigenous and local communities in Argentina who are campaigning against the expansion of fracking in the Vaca Muerta oil and gas fields, which is happening and has been happening for nearly 15 years now, again with the explicit intention to generate revenue to meet debt payments. The third and fourth points I want to make are more about the ways that the international community's failure or refusal to justly respond to the climate crisis is further exacerbating the debt crisis. So May's touched on this as well already, but I think we probably all come from the same place and agree that rich countries owe a climate debt to the global south for their role in creating the climate emergency, and that they should be providing climate finance to global south countries. But of course, this isn't really happening. And as a result, there is a finance gap, and many global south governments have to borrow to fill that gap. To add insult to injury, those loans that governments are borrowing are getting more and more expensive because of their climate vulnerability. So lenders are saying, you are less likely to be able to meet your debt payments because of your climate vulnerability, so I'm going to charge you more for your loans. So countries are essentially being financially punished for being on the front lines of the climate crisis. The new climate finance goal that was agreed last year is deeply inadequate and going to keep countries stuck in borrowing in order to respond to the climate crisis. And to put this very simply, this means when a climate disaster happens, debt levels go up. You can see this time and time again in different countries.
Introduce, and I would just so I would follow from what May and Tess have already spoke about, and I will be speaking from our Global South context. My name is Esther. I represent and mobilize with Debt for Climate in Nigeria, and I would speak on the debt, climate, and the struggle for justice as a Nigerian. And I organize in Nigeria as one of the African countries that has been mentioned in the previous presentation about the climate injustice and the debt dependency. I'll begin like talking about fossil fuel. Nigeria is rich in oil. We are rich in human capital, in biodiversity, but we are also deeply indebted. This, I would say, not by choice, but by design. Like that is something that has been happening for years. I was able to put in my presentation last year, Nigeria spent about 13.12 trillion on debt servicing. And there's been a 68% increase from the 7.8 trillion spent in 2023. So there's been increase from the previous year to the next year. And here we are again, 2025, which is another debt for us to add to the data. This was picked from the Debt Management Office. And if we are talking about this debt, we could ask, like, what do we really borrow for? So most of these debts are taken for us to repay the colonial debt. We are using this to pay back loans. So we take debts to pay back another debt. And this continues year in, continues year out. And this has affected a lot of African countries to be able to build resilience against the issues that we did not cause. And when we speak out, we are told, you must reform, you must remove subsidies, which is leading to currency devaluation, resources being exported, and which makes life very difficult for the common Africans. The reforms, they are not natural, they are painful, everyday realities for working people. So debt is not just a number, it's not just a data to us, it is a barrier to survival for many Africans. And I would also talk on the experiences so far, like personally that I have. We have in a community where flooding was more than 2 months. These displaced families, farms are being destroyed, entire villages being submerged. You see homes being deserted, women having to fight for their lives and have to carry their children on their backs to walk through the deep waters to find shelters. And the government would say there is no money for them to help. Yet we watch as billions are repaid to creditors in the global north. And we are paying twice, once with money and again with our lives. And if you check a recent data where it says like Nigeria repaid one of its debt, but then there are still a lot more for us to repay back. While we are sinking and sinking in debt, we are also crying out for survival. And what makes it worse for us is the only way Nigeria can fund climate projects is through more loans. We saw this in new government repaying loans and taking more loans. And many of these loans are from institutions in the global north or even climate loans with interest, yet we call it climate finance. To me, it is still climate debt. And now when you talk about climate finance, debt injustice, they are still presenting us debt swap and the like. So even though we are very rich in oil, you talk about the fossil fuel, and we are being pushed to dig deeper into the crisis to repay legitimate debt. So resources are being taken away just for us to pay debt. So it's like when you are at the mercy of your lenders. Well, as Africans, we seek for immediate and unconditional debt cancellation for countries in the global south. These debts are illegitimate. They are born from colonial extraction, corruption supported by foreign powers, systems never designed for our liberation. We demand a shift from loan-based climate finance. This is not charity, and this is being owned. Like, this is debt. We are in debt. It is a crisis. And the global north owes us for centuries of extraction, emissions and exploitation. We also demand that countries like the United Kingdom pass the debt justice law to stop vulture funds from profiting off our pain and to ensure that climate action is not blocked by profit-driven contracts. A contract that is not favorable, you take this loan and you pay back high interest. And also, we need the IMF and the World Bank to be held accountable, not as neutral helpers, but as enforcers of a system that pushes climate vulnerable nations further into crisis. And this also includes establishing a United Nations Framework Convention on sovereign debt from discussions held at the Finance for Development Conference in Israel. So we are looking forward to the FFD4 conference, and hopefully to hear what this Global North have for the Global South during this conference. Hopefully these leaders attend the conference. Our message is clear. It is simple. We are requesting that we cancel the debt to fund climate justice and let us live. Because right now it is more than paying back debt. It is more on fighting for our survival. It is not just fighting for economic reform, but it's like we are fighting for our lives. And we are saying this with our dignity, with our voice. We have been screaming it. And of course, we saw the works of some of the Global South comrades, but then we are still calling on our allies in the Global North. Your solidarity matters. And for those who have been joining forces to seek for this climate justice in the Global North, we still seek your solidarity more, to join us in demanding action, for you to join lobbies, to organize and interrupt, because the time is now, and we are really depending and looking forward to what comes out of the FFD4 conference. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Esther. It's really clear from what you've said just why we need action, and really how obscene it is that when people in climate vulnerable countries are just want survival and dignity, that then international creditors just look at that and see an opportunity to make money off it. So the next speaker is Lorraine Inglis, and she works with Debt for Climate in the UK. And Lorraine's going to talk a bit about what opportunities there are coming up to take action on debt.
Take myself off of mute. Thanks, Esther. Thanks for the speakers. Yeah, I'm Lorraine Inglis. I'm a global coordinator along with Esther at Debt for Climate, and also one of the European coordinators. So I'm just going to share my screen too. Just bear with me. Okay. So I'm going to, can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. So I'm going to whiz through these first few slides, as some on the call may not know what Jubilee 2025 is. So the term Jubilee comes from ancient traditions where even every 50 years of debt were cancelled. Enslaved people were freed and land was returned. It was about restoring balance and justice. The Jubilee movement revives that idea globally every 25 years, demanding an end to debt injustice. This year is the largest international debt justice campaign since the first Jubilee year, Drop the Debt campaign, which won 130 billion of debt cancellation. And that was at the millennium that Claire referred to earlier on. Jubilee 2025 is not a single organisation, but a decentralised movement uniting faith communities, climate campaigners, and anti-colonial activists around a shared demand: cancel the debt and finance climate justice. So what are the demands of the Jubilee 2025? Number one is end the debt crisis. And that is, as Esther has gone through, cancel illegitimate and unsustainable debt unconditionally. And number two is tackle the root causes of the debt crises. Create a fair global financial system and put people, all people and the planet at the centre. And number three is create sustainable and fair solutions. Esther touched upon this. This is where we could agree on a legal binding new debt framework convention under the umbrella of the United Nations. The Jubilee strategy focuses on immediate relief through debt cancellation and long-term systematic change to prevent future crises. There is a petition link for these demands, which we will share in the chat later. So to key global Jubilee 2025 moments, campaigners and activists around the world are uniting to demand action on unjust debt. It's a huge year for the campaign. And as you can see here, May 25th to the 28th was the Relay of Hope. It happened outside the Treasury. It was a UK interfaith action. Happened last Tuesday, around 40 countries took part in this. On May touched upon this too. June 27th to 28th, we're going to talk about this in more detail. It's the Finance for Development for conference, and there are the Global Days of Action. And then there's November the 15th, which is the COP30 mobilizations, and November 23rd to 25th, which is the G20 summit, which is the first time that this is going to be held in Africa. So bringing the focus back to the UK, here to the UK, we are uniting all of these organisations that you see here under the Cancel Debt, Choose Hope banner, which is our Jubilee 2025 message, to pressure the UK government into taking meaningful action. As a coalition, we meet every couple of weeks to discuss strategy and mobilisation plans. And you can see here at the launch of our campaign outside the Treasury in January of this year, the Treasury is obviously a popular spot for our debt mobilisations. And the key efforts that our coalition are working on are a new debt justice law. Bambos Charalambos MP has introduced a bill in Parliament, and we're campaigning to build support across MPs. This proposed debt justice law is crucial, as you will be surprised to know that over 90% of Global South debt contracts are governed by UK law. Private creditors and companies like hedge funds and oil traders, they block any meaningful debt cancellation by dragging their feet and stalling negotiations for years. And they can currently sue countries for full payment, which pushes them further into debt. The UK can pass this new law to force private creditors to participate in this process fairly. And the UK has a responsibility to act, and this costs nothing to the UK taxpayer. There's a picture there of a few of us, the coalition, delivering the debt justice petition to number 10 in March of this year. So if you've got any questions on the debt justice law, you can direct those to our expert, Tess. And another key effort, which you've heard quite a bit about, well, you've heard it mentioned, is the FFD4. It's the acronym for the Finance for Development 4 conference, and it is a big deal. This is an international conference run and owned by governments, and it's the first summit in over a decade. And unlike the G7, the G20, or the International Monetary Fund meetings, where the Global South are continually sidelined, the FFD process is one of the only global spaces where every country has an equal say, and where civil society can fight to put climate, debt, and justice at the centre. That is why FFD4 matters to the climate justice movement. It's a critical opportunity to shape the future of global economic and climate governance. One key demand is the UN Framework Convention on Sovereign Debt. This is led by Global South countries to finally bring transparency, fairness and justice to how the debt crises are dealt with. And crucially, this would be outside the control of the IMF, World Bank and private creditors. Of late, there has been references to this conference as the Conference of Survival. Thousands are mobilizing for FFD4 because this conference is where we fight to rewrite the rules of a rigged global economy, and we need your voice in that fight. So, of course, many of you here in the UK will know about the Climate Coalition are organising a mass lobby of MPs on Wednesday, the 9th of July. And around 10,000 people are expected together in Westminster in groups with others from their constituency. And this is an important opportunity for all of us to push debt justice into the political agenda and stress that debt justice is critical in the struggle for climate justice, and ultimately demand this new debt justice law. So to the important part, how to get involved, because your participation in these events amplifies our collective voice. As part of the FFD4 Global Days of Action, which May talked about in her last slide, and that is partly organised by May's organisation at APMDD. It's a coalition of UK charities and campaigners are coming together in London, where we will construct a giant Jenga tower on the south bank of the Thames to symbolise the way debt destabilises countries in the global south, and of course, to grab the attention of the UK media. If you're not in London, we feel free to organise an action stunt in your town or city. It can just be one of you, or join in with online actions. For those in the constituency of Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves or David Lammy, you could consider a stunt outside their offices. We will share resources to help, so make sure you complete the form that's shared in the chat. Please come and join us and register on the form. And then, of course, we've talked about the debt justice, the Climate Coalition mass lobby, and we'll be taking action with nearly 150 other organisations in the UK when we join this mass lobby of Parliament. And as I've said, it is a huge opportunity to speak to our MPs directly about the debt crisis, how it links closely to the climate crisis, and why urgent action for a debt justice law here is so needed. If enough of us come together on the 9th of July to speak to our MPs in person, it will send a really powerful signal about public support for action on global South debt. Speaking to your MP face-to-face about the issues you care about can leave a real impact on them and help raise the profile of issues they may not otherwise have had on their radar. If you think that you might be able to join us on Wednesday, the 9th of July in London, please register your interest now via the link in the chat so that we can be in touch with all the information that you need about how to lobby your MP and what's happening on the day. And before the mass lobby, we will be running trainings on talking to your MP about debt to make sure that you're fully prepared. The Climate Coalition will also run a series of trainings to support you, whether this is your first time speaking to your MP or you've done it many times before. So there'll be two links shared in the chat, and register now. And we will follow up with all the additional details about the event. With enough of us there on the day, it could be a pivotal moment in the campaign for debt justice. And then let's look in briefly at other key UK 2025 mobilisations. September the 20th and the 21st, there's major mobilisations for the Make Them Pay campaign. And November the 15th, Global Day of Action during COP30. There is a meeting that's organised by the Climate Justice Coalition here in the UK to go into more detail about these mobilisations, including the FFD4 UK action that we've just spoken about. Now, this meeting is happening tomorrow, 5th June at 12 p.m. and there is a link that you can register that's going to be posted in the chat. So come and join our movement. I shared with you some demands earlier on about Jubilee, and there is a petition which we're directing the Jubilee petition to Debt Justice. This link will be shared. Sign this petition, and of course, join us at Debt for Climate. We would love to have you on board. We have onboarding sessions regularly, and next one is actually next Tuesday at 6 p.m. and there is a link for you to register to join. They are really informative sessions, and from there you can go and decide if you just want to come and be part of our Debt for Climate family. Follow all of us on social media, Debt for Climate, Debt Justice, Asians People Movement, to get regular updates. And if you want to reach out, contact us at europe@debtforclimate.org and we can direct your query. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to Claire to see whether or not there are any questions that we can help with. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Right. I'm just going to put, because I've been sharing links for Lorraine, so lots of links in the chat there, and I'm going to put our social media there, and it's I'm going to add our Blue Sky link because that is the one that I'm using most at the moment, though you can also find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the others campaigning against climate change. So I just want to say, first of all, well, thank you for all the speakers. It's been so informative. Tess, was there anything that you would just like to add when you got so rudely interrupted by your internet cutting out?
Firstly, just to apologise profusely. Believe it or not, my internet never actually does this, so it's chosen a perfect moment. My last slide was really just to pull together everything I'd said. So I basically just wanted to echo what May had said about what we call the climate debt trap. So on the one hand, we've talked about how the debt crisis is undermining climate action. And then on the other hand, we've talked about how the international community's refusal to justly respond to the climate crisis is fueling the debt crisis. And this creates essentially a vicious cycle. And we cannot achieve climate justice if we do not break this cycle, which is why we're all here, which is why we're working on the debt climate nexus and why we're kind of promoting the fact that debt justice is a vital part of climate justice. Yeah, those were going to be my final words, but thank you for giving me space for that.
No worries. I see Lucinda's asked an important question in the chat, which is, could all these links be emailed out? And yes, I will be sending them out to everyone who's actually registered for the meeting. So could anyone who would like to speak, could you stick your hand up if you've got any questions, or of course you can just put them in the chat if that's easier. So
I'm going to ask a question of Tess.
go for it. Go for it.
I want to know, well, I kind of know, but what are the outcomes? What are the potential outcomes? We've talked up really big about the Finance for Development conference that is happening in Seville. That, you know, this is a global space, but what does these outcomes look like for the global south?
It's a great question, and let me have a go, and then I will hand over to May as well, who may have some different perspectives as well to add. But so just to give a snapshot of where things are at, so the outcome of the Financing for Development conference is currently being negotiated. Negotiations should, the facilitators, the co-facilitators of the process would like the negotiations to finish tomorrow. Whether that happens or not is yet to be seen. What is positive about the negotiations so far is that the radical debt demands that have been shared today are still in the draft text, which is very encouraging. We've seen some really, really powerful demands from global South governments, including those in AOSIS, the African Union, the African Negotiating Bloc, Pakistan, Nigeria, etc., are all there pushing for this convention. So it's not just civil society, it's global self-governments. They're united calling for this. The problem is, as you can probably all guess, that we have some major blockers in the negotiations. So we have the UK, European countries, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, all trying to block progress on debt. So we're at the moment where we're at a bit of a stalemate. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. All the negotiations now are happening behind closed doors. So everything is shut off. The US has yet to say what its position is, which is slightly scary because they're probably going to throw their weight in a direction that we don't want it to go. However, all is not lost at this conference. This conference is obviously a huge moment for debt justice, and we want to achieve this convention. Even if it's not achieved at this conference, it is going to be a demand that we keep pushing moving forward. And we know that this stuff is going to take time. But yeah, we're all kind of sitting on the edges of our seats waiting to see what's going to come out of these closed door negotiations. But May, also want to hand over to you to see if you have any different perspectives around what we can expect and where things are at.
Yeah, so just as Tess said, it's we're entering a dangerous time that we don't know anymore because we're not allowed even as observers. So we're making this push in social media, also tagging the co-facilitators, particularly in our region, Nepal and Pakistan, to keep up the ambition, no? Because while the debt convention benefits all, it benefits especially the borrowing countries. And we've also reached out nationally through our members to the governments themselves, such as in Sri Lanka. And also we're working out a dialogue there and also here in the Philippines, just to say this is our ask as civil society, and why we should really push for supporting the what the mechanism has called the last progressive shred in the zero draft, because that's a paragraph on agreeing on an intergovernmental process that could lead to the establishment of a UN debt convention. And without such a space and a process, we remain at the mercy of the richest countries in the IMF and the World Bank. And in connection with this, I also want to share why we really need to raise the pressure on the IMF and the World Bank, because the IMF is mentioned, I think, almost 30 times in the zero draft, and being given with the support of the rich countries, of course, and the blockers, being given major roles to play in international financial architecture reform, which is really, ridiculous to say the least, that they caused the problem and now they're being asked to lead in finding solutions. So this is really something that we need to push back against as the IFIs continue to claw their way back to relevance and legitimacy, following the decline in 2008, 2009, and now they're back in full force with more money that they're bragging about. And in connection also, I just want to share that the International People's Tribunal will be having its first session outside Asia on June 18 to 19 in Lilongwe, Malawi. And this is also, of course, adds to the build-up for FFD4 and really seeking accountability, demanding accountability from the IMF and the World Bank. Yeah, thanks. That's all.
So I can see a question in the chat from Annie, and the statistic we were given was that 90% of the global debts are governed by UK law. So she's asked, can you explain why it's down to the UK to administer these debts, and why they're allowed to punish countries in crisis instead of cancelling the debt? So who'd like to come back on that one?
I'm going to spotlight Tess straight away. She's the debt justice law expert.
Oh gosh, that feels a bit intense. Okay, there's a really simple answer to this: colonialism. We live in, well, the global economic, legal systems, etc., still echo the power dynamics of colonialism, where global North countries, global North powers still have that level of control over decision making and how things work. And that is seen played out in the legal structures behind the debt system. So yeah, 90% of external debts from Global South countries are governed under UK law. The remainder are primarily governed under New York law. And that's mostly it. That means that both those jurisdictions are absolutely key in trying to get debt cancellation happening now and stopping private creditors from profit seeking off the backs of people's lives, people's well-being in Global South countries. They're allowed to keep punishing countries, to keep pushing countries into debt, because this is how the system is set up. And like I said, it echoes colonial power structures. One way of looking at the debt system is that it's failing because it's not supporting countries to stay out of debt and to fix when debt crises happen. Another way to look at it, as May's talked about, is that the debt system was set up this way. It was set up this way deliberately to maintain colonial power dynamics, continue to extract resources from the Global South, plunder resources, and keep Global South countries controlled by Global North governments, institutions, and corporations. And so it's allowed because the powers that be have structured it this way, would be my answer. I don't know if any of the other panelists would like to come in on that though as well.
Yeah, I might add in some of the meetings that I've been in that, the UK government don't even see that there is this enormous debt crisis, because it's being reported. They listen to what the IMF are saying. So yeah, that's also something quite interesting, which is why the mass lobby is so important, because I think a lot of our MPs are really not clear on the state of the debt crisis. So yeah, this is why we're really pushing people to come on board to the mass lobby in the debt campaign capacity, because we can see that it is extrinsically linked to the climate justice. So yeah, that's something that has surprised me going into some of these debt advocacy meetings, to see how little our MPs are actually clued up to. Check.
Thanks, Lucy. Tess just put a resource in the chat for anyone who wants to learn more about the colonial nature of Global South debt. Yeah, so question is Gordon Brown helping? Has he been a voice? Is he probably been more helpful than Tony Blair has recently on climate things?
That's not hard. That's not hard to be better. Does anyone mind if I jump in again? Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I promise not to on the next question. Yeah, so Gordon Brown was obviously a big part of debt cancellation in the early 2000s, so has a legacy of playing a really significant role in addressing the debt crisis from a UK standpoint. He has been very supportive on raising the profile of the debt emergency that is happening right now. So I think he's done some opinion pieces in The Guardian, and I know that some of our allies like Christian Aid are in touch with him and trying to talk to him about that. I'm not sure exactly if he's come out strongly on our specific demands about the debt justice law, but generally he is quite, he's in favour of sorting out the debt crisis, I would say.
I was thinking when Esther was talking about the situation in Nigeria, it's quite powerful to think about how it affects people in a specific country, because when you get you have the big global picture and all the numbers, I mean, they're quite shocking. But I know that when Pakistan was so badly hit by floods, there were lots of conversations about the double impact of the climate disaster and the debt. And I wondered if there are other countries that sort of stand out as being ones that are being really screwed by this. Feel free. Anyone to
Yeah.
contribute?
Yeah, I would say recent news about Malawi as well were really it. And also, as regards the UK lobbying, just checking if we have European leaders who would be attending the FFD conference. So far, we have about 33 head of state from Africa. Of course, Africa would be attending. And it seems most of the European leaders would not be at the conference. So are there leaders who would be attending from Europe to hear people cry, to hear them speak about the issues that we are facing in Africa?
I'd just like to add for the FFD conference that what we've seen so far is, I mean, as Tess has covered, the real lack of commitment, but none of the heads of states from the global north are attending this conference. There is a campaign both in Europe and here in the UK to encourage at least the head of the states to attend these conferences, because this is how little they want to be part of any dialogue. So yeah, that has been quite horrifying to see, really, as the meetings have progressed within the civil society organizations on looking at, you know, we thought this was a ground for real discussions, but people are not even turning up. As Tess said, like the US are literally just sitting back. They did a statement and said that they didn't want anything changed, and now they're just sitting back. So yeah, they just want the status quo, which is just really sad. But as Tess said, there is still opportunity, and that's what we've got to fight for. Check.
There's another question in the chat from John, and asking about campaigning and our diaspora communities in the UK and the global north more widely being involved in this.
We are doing a lot of efforts to like reach out to different communities and groups through different means. I don't think we're actually connected with many diaspora communities at the moment, but it is something that we're really trying to do, to try and build those connections. So yeah, that's actually a helpful reminder for me to make sure that I push that point when I go back to the team tomorrow. But yeah, it's on our minds, and it's something that is part of the work we're trying to do.
Yeah, also addressing the diaspora communities, not exactly diaspora, but climate migrants. So, and we're really very inspired that the Alliance of Small Island States has stood up very strongly in support of the debt convention, because they're really at the brink of fighting for survival, and they're also one of those affected by migration due to climate change. And that's not only happening, of course, in the small island states, but also in many parts of Asia, where you have both the internal and external migration due to the climate crisis. Thanks.
Thanks. So we're due to wrap up in a few minutes, and I think maybe if the speakers have last couple of words, maybe more than a couple of words, a couple of thoughts they'd like to share. So May, since you're on the screen anyway, I'll put you on the spot first.
Okay, so you know, the tax convention took us 15 years before we got to this point. So this is there may be some questions, especially from our grassroots members. So why are we doing a lot of stuff, like spending also a lot of resources on FFD4, and we explain, we don't have any illusions about these arenas where the work shall continue beyond FFD4, and we remain firmly, our conviction in the power of people and social movements to effect change remains firm. And this goes beyond conferences of the UN, such as the FFD4. But we're taking advantage of this vital opportunity to speak to publics across global regions and also engaging our governments to take this step in the direction of democratizing the international financial and debt architecture. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd
Right.
like to actually follow directly on to that point, because we at Debt for Climate, we are a radical, like, grassroots movement. And when the Finance for Development conference came on our radar, it was like, oh, this is just like another conference that is in the UN space. Why are we going to participate in this? But of course, we have to step up. And what I have seen is that regardless of what those outcomes are at the FFD4, it has brought us again as debt allies even stronger. And we're hoping that through these webinars and through this outreach, that more people will step up to join the fight against, like, the debt the debt crisis that we're in at the moment. So yeah, that is something that has been really difficult for us to kind of step into this space, knowing that the outcomes are going to have shortfalls, but knowing that we have to be in there, but participating with so many passionate campaigners. It doesn't matter what comes out of this conference, the fight will still be really strong, and it bonds us all. So I just wanted to follow on from that point that May made. Check.
That's great. Can I bring in Esther? I see Esther.
I think we just lost her.
Oh,
Sorry. She was there. I think she must have gone to unmute herself, and then she might have cut off.
oh, that's a shame. I'll bring in Tess then.
Okay, it's tough to follow that because it's everything's been said, but I suppose just a reflection on this year. Like, I've only worked in debt for like 4 years. People have worked on it for decades, but by far this feels like the biggest potential, the biggest moment of opportunity we've had in a long time. Not only because we have these conferences and these spaces where we can actually we're pushing for this kind of actual transformation of the debt system, which will positively impact the climate crisis, but also because we have this biggest mobilization of organizations around the world in 25 years. So these two things are coming together, and as May and Lorena said, it feels incredibly powerful. It feels like there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of momentum for us to build and keep moving forward together. So I'm just really grateful for everyone to come and be here and listen to us, and we really hope to see you at some of these activities.
I would say we're looking forward to the lobby in the UK, and also there are a lot of expectations from the FFD4 conference, and I'm very much also looking forward to what we can get out from that. Thank you, everyone.
Can I add something, Claire?
Of course.
Yeah. Perhaps we need to talk a bit more of the weaknesses of the crisis of the North itself, because we don't often point out that the opportunity is also because they are now at one of their weakest points in their fragmentation, what's happening to the US and its allies. So it's really, for us, the opportunity is gold to strike when they are experiencing these cracks in the capitalist system. Thanks.
Wow, I think that's a fascinating topic to bring up to the end. Yeah, hidden silver linings in the current breakdown of everything that's happening in the US. So thank you again to our speakers, and a special shout out to May for joining us in the middle of the night. And as I said before, we'll be sending around an email with information about the key actions going on. The 28th of June, 9th of July climate lobby. And of course, there's a lot more climate justice campaigning going on in the run up to COP 30 in November, which, yep, busy year. And thanks so much for everyone attending.
Thank you.